wonderful to have you on. I really want to know more about the Immigration Accountability Project. I'm very excited to talk to you about it. And from what I understand, your focus is on H-1B, or is it broader than that?
Yeah, it's much broader than that. We do the entire immigration issue. And my co-founder, Chris Shimolinski, and I have actually, I've been doing immigration since 1990. And trying to get legal immigration reduced and illegal immigration stopped, obviously. And H-1Bs have always been a focus because our primary concern is American workers. You know, immigration is killing American workers at every level of the economy, H-1Bs and green cards at the top levels, and, family-based immigration and lower skilled temporary workers at the bottom level. So everyone's getting hit with it, and it's just too much. It's been going on, mass immigration has been happening for too long in this country.
Yeah, I mean, they opened the door in 1965, but it really went, like 50 doors were opened in the 1990s. And then every year it seems as if there's a new opening further of the door, new loopholes and crazy things. So we're in a time where hopefully we can, I would like to radically restrict, make radical changes. I don't want to nibble at the edges. And I think most Americans are with me. We do not want to nibble away at this anymore. We don't want to talk about it. We want things done. So I call for an executive order or that would place a moratorium on legal immigration or even the change of status for national security reasons. And I think that that could be justified in our sleep, that the national security issues and labor and the economy are very much a national security issue as well. What do you think about a moratorium? We'll just go straight to the end and go straight to the perfect panacea. Is that possible? Could President Trump do that?
President Trump could do it on a very temporary basis. He has authority under 8 USC 1182F to restrict any alien or any class of aliens for the national interest, basically. But he can only restrict the entry of them. So he couldn't, and this is part of the problem with the H-1B proclamation. It is very limited to his authority to restrict entry rather than, change of status or anyone who's already in the country. He can't stop them or, just halt their visas or remove them. But he certainly could stop all new entries. But, we've had bills introduced in Congress that back in the late 1990s, I actually wrote a bill for then Congressman Tom Tancredo for a full moratorium. Harry Reid actually introduced a moratorium bill back in the day. This is something that has been talked about since the 1990s, but instead of actually looking at immigration as a normal public policy, which it is, and therefore should serve the national interest, Congress has used it to serve corporate interests and other, big religion and big ag and so on. And they've basically looked at it like a Christmas tree where a special interest group comes in and says, well, I need a visa for X, Y, or Z. And Congress just says, okay, we'll create a brand new visa for that category of people. And so it's just got all these ornaments on it. It's a completely illogical system. It does not in any way serve the national interest. And a moratorium is actually the perfect way to really get a handle on what kind of immigration policy serves our interests. Not corporate interests, not special interests, but the interests of Americans.
I call it America First immigration policy. And it seems to me that how long could he place a moratorium through executive order?
Well, he could do it through his term as president. except, of course, it would be challenged by the courts and it would have to go through that whole process. And it's likely that the courts would allow immigration to continue until they rule on it or until the Supreme Court steps in. So, it's unclear based on our activist court system whether he could actually get it started. But the Supreme Court has upheld in the past his authority. Actually, the so-called Muslim travel ban was based on this same authority, and the Supreme Court upheld that. So eventually it would be upheld, but it's a matter of, how much impact could actually be made during that court process.
But what we could do is have a national conversation. My vision is that, firstly, we know American-born citizens and even many immigrants that have been here for quite some time want a ban. I was just talking to G. Van Fleet. She's from communist China from the 80s. She says in the 80s, we came loving America students. And she says the Chinese immigrants that have come from 2000 and on hate America. They are indoctrinated to come here for subversive purposes, and they absolutely hate the country. She wants a moratorium. So it is also certain classes of immigrants that are truly have become, and I agree with her entirely. She's as American as I am, and she's as patriotic as I am. And she was born in communist China and didn't come till she was probably 18 or 16, I'm not sure. But anyway, if we had a moratorium, we could have a national conversation, and I envision it in a way that it is not corporate interests, because that's who 50% or more of those who testify before Congress are just corporate interests, and NGOs or agencies that favor mass immigration, whatever they call it. But instead, we have a national conversation, a series nationwide of the people, of labor, of commentators, of just Americans who have had their lives affected or who have knowledge, like you would be a speaker. And you would give your testimony, but it's not controlled by Congress. It's controlled in a way by the people, or maybe even at the direction of the president, where he says, we're going to set these things up, and we'll have 2.5 years, 3 years of national conversation, because we can't do it in 3 months, can we? There's too much to say.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, Americans have never voted for the immigration system we have now. And we've been lied to about it since at least the 1960s. I mean, remember, Ted Kennedy lied to us about what the impact of the 1965 Immigration Act would be and said it would not increase the numbers in any way. It was just shifting the grounds of origin. And yet, of course, it skyrocketed immigration. And then Congress voted in 1990 to increase legal immigration by another third. And that went even further. The amnesty in 1986 caused a massive increase in immigration, legal immigration, as well as, of course, illegal immigration. And the American people have never been given a chance to voice their concerns. And, instead we're called racist and bigots and homophobic and xenophobic and all the rest of it. But the problem is, this is our country. It's our home. And we have a right to have a say in the future of our country. And so far, we have not been given that right. We have not been given the opportunity. And so, yes, whether it's done by the president or whether it's done by Congress, and actually, I am very hopeful that there will be a moratorium bill introduced in Congress in fairly short order.
And do you know who's putting that forward?
I do, but I can't say at the moment.
Maybe offline, you could whisper in my ear.
Yeah. I don't want to jinx it before
you don't
it
want
happens.
to jinx it. Okay, no problem. I respect. So, a moratorium with a long period of national conversation. Again, that's just in my head. I have these grand visions, and we allow the American people to speak because, as you said, this is our country. It's our American birthright, as I call it, as well, because when I'm born in America, I'm born not just with a birth certificate, but a birthright. It's called the Constitution. And our immigration system is utterly undermining the future of America. And this goes so beyond any other kind of policy decision, does it not? Because of the nature of immigration altering if you do it the way we have been doing it since the 60s, it alters the culture. And therefore, we're changing America, and no one asked us, do you want to be a Muslim country? Do you want to be a Spanish-speaking country? Do you want to be a Marxist country or a Hindu country? No one has asked us, are you okay if in 2050, America is no longer America anymore because you changed it so dramatically?
Yeah, and that is exactly where we're headed right now. If we continue with the status quo, we are going to lose our country. Full stop. We just are. And that's, one of the reasons I got involved in immigration. It's funny because my mother was actually a legal immigrant, and I never thought about immigration when I was growing up, except that we made fun of her because she had a green card and she was called an alien, and we thought that was hysterical. But, it wasn't until I actually started looking at the issue and I realized that every other issue I care about is massively impacted by immigration. Whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, national security,
elections,
labor force, all of it is massively impacted by immigration, and nobody take that into account when we set immigration policy.
Everything is affected by immigration. Here's immigration and visas, which is under that umbrella. And every single issue, from our economy to families to housing to jobs, of course, to voting, to election integrity, to culture, to religion, there is nothing unaffected that I can think of. And so it is, in a sense, the foundational policy or doctrine or protection or subversion of all things America. It is foundational.
Yeah, that is absolutely why the founders of this country put Congress in charge of immigration, specifically in the Constitution. Congress has plenary power over immigration, according to the Constitution, because the founders realized that this is it is an issue that can change a country. It can change a nation. And so they thought that, having our elected representatives debate it and decide what would be in the best interest of their voters was the right place to do it.
But what we found is that it's all backroom. It's all backroom. We never know what's going on until it's over. And our reporter, Amanda Barlota, has discovered that back when, I don't know, it's 2003, I believe, that it became a trade issue. And so what horrified me was when we started talking about the negotiations for tariffs, which, of course, I'm thrilled about. I love tariffs. But then I started getting a whiff of, wait a minute, there seems to be talk about immigration or visas as relates to tariffs. And I thought, wait a minute, this is the Department of Commerce should have nothing to do with the Department of Labor, USCIS, State Department issues, immigration, naturalization. The Department of Commerce has its remit. But I guess back in the World Trade Organization, that this became muddled at that time in the 2000s. And so we are literally having trade negotiations. And I think that our people in this administration are sincerely doing their best. I believe that for most of them that they are when they're out there negotiating these things. But I don't think that they're going to be educated like you and even myself on the full extent and the details and the extent of the numbers and how it's affecting America. Because if it's the Department of Treasury, if you're the Secretary of Treasury or Secretary of Commerce, you can't possibly know everything that you need to know about a specialty issue like immigration. It's too vast and too big.
Well, and we actually had a giant fight over immigration and trade deals under W. Bush during the negotiations on I think it was the Chile Free Trade Agreement, where the Bush administration actually added a carve-out of H-1Bs for Chileans. And Congress said, whoa, no, you don't get to do that. Our job is immigration, not yours. Immigration has no place in trade agreements.
Oh, it's hitting me. I'm sorry. I'm an interrupter. I have to, the light bulb moment. Congress has plenary power. And if you're negotiating things in trade deals through the administration that are, expanding immigration or any kind of visa program, but of course, Congress, Chevron deference, Congress gave, and now it's unconstitutional, but gave so much power to the regulatory agencies. And that's kind of the spaghetti bowl thing for me, because Congress has a plenary power. We want President Trump to be able to put a stop to the madness, because this is lunacy. It's nothing less than suicide. And so we do want that much. I don't know where. And then there's the regulatory agencies that have done, I would say, unlawful things like OPT, STEM OPT, the way that all was handled. And that's one of the worst things that we have today is STEM OPT. And that's for students that are supposed to go straight home at the end of their college career and by law, and yet they're allowed to stay here and then eventually continue for decades and get green cards. So can you disentangle that spaghetti bowl for me and explain, and also maybe explain where we have the pain points on this? Because if we can stop certain things happening because we say, wait a minute, Congress has plenary power, but then I'm more than willing to be a compromiser and say, well, but President Trump, you do this other thing that's good, and who cares about Congress's plenary power? So I'm being selfish and hypocritical, but go ahead. You explain it to us.
So the reason that the president has the power to stop the entry of any alien or class of aliens is because Congress delegated it to him specifically in statute. The reason that the executive branch under W. Bush and then expanding it under Obama was able to create OPT and DACA and H-4 EADs was because Congress put a little phrase in the law. It's just one little phrase that basically says that employment authorization can be offered based on any category that Congress has authorized it for, or by the Attorney General. It's that or by the Attorney General.
Can you say that again?
There's a provision in immigration law that basically says employment authorization documents can be issued to any alien where Congress has authorized it, or by the Attorney General. So the or by the Attorney General, who's now the Secretary of Homeland Security, that gives DHS basically total discretion to issue employment authorization documents to any group of aliens they choose.
Why is that in there? What's the meaning of life? Why is that there? Some big questions.
This is Congress delegating its authority to unelected bureaucrats in that instance. So, this has caused so much trouble. And actually, Brandon Gill from Texas has a bill called the Domestic Jobs Protection Act that would strike that phrase. It would eliminate OPT, H-4 EADs, parole work permits, all of these executive branch work permits that have been handed out over the years. This would get rid of them. So unless a category of aliens is specifically authorized by Congress to get a work permit, they would not under his bill.
So does that have the proverbial chance of the snowball's chance in hell to get through?
Well, right now I can tell you that it has 5 co-sponsors.
Oh.
So, yeah, it doesn't look great. But, he is on the Judiciary Committee, so there's a better chance that it could get through. But, again, all of these special interest groups are going to be opposed to it. All of the, big business and big ag and, the forward U.S. and all the tech giants are going to be opposed to it because it takes away a lot of discretionary work permits, including H-4s and OPT.
Well, what would that do to the president's ability to restrict based on national security?
No, not a thing. It doesn't affect that.
Is the president's ability only, power authorized to him only on the basis of restriction, or can he open it wide? Is it only constriction?
Only restrict.
Oh.
Yeah, he can prevent the...
Okay. Well, then what we want is Gill's bill to pass, which, we understand. But because it will allow the president to get the ball rolling if he so chooses and is, help to understand why that would be so important. So he could still restrict, but then DHS would no longer be able to create new programs and authorize increases or whatever, however they have done so. What about the Department of Commerce, rather? How is the Department of Commerce able to make a deal with China, which I'm hoping is not going to happen? I'm praying on this, that when President Trump said, yes, in this back and forth war or battle with Xi, we're going to allow 600,000 Chinese students. And I'm thinking, certainly that was a typo in your notes, right? I mean, it can't be true. But how would the president, or would it actually be the DHS that would have to create some new authorization?
That's the problem, is that so many of our visa categories are unlimited, and student visas is one of them. There's no numerical cap on student visas. Mm-hmm. So the president could tell DHS, I want you to let in an extra, that would basically double the number of students from China. The president could tell DHS to do that, and it would be totally within the law because Congress failed to put limit on student visas. And that it's a huge problem. This is where, again, Congress is delegating its authority to unelected bureaucrats, but also I was here for the fight over H-1Bs in the Chilean free trade agreement. I think it was Chile and Singapore, where Congress threw a fit over this carve out of H-1Bs. But nobody else remembers that. And I'm sure that nobody has told the Commerce Department or the current trade negotiators that issue was in most people's minds settled at that time, that no, immigration does not belong in trade agreement. So, the question now will be, if the president decides to negotiate immigration as part of trade deals or tariff deals or whatever, will Congress stand up to him? And, I don't know that they will at this point.
Well, let me ask you about that. If Congress said clearly to President Bush that, no, you're not going to, put in a Chilean or any other Singapore, any other kind of immigration clause in trade agreements, what made him back down? Just the uproar, or was it an action taken?
He didn't back down on that one. It was like Congress said, well, there's nothing we can do about it now, because by that point, by the time they knew about it, the trade deal was done and it was being presented to the Senate to ratify, and Congress to the House to ratify. And so they basically screamed and yelled and said, this can never happen again. And everybody agreed, okay, we'll let it go this time, but it can never happen again. And the next several trade agreements that were negotiated did not include immigration provisions, thankfully. And that was one of the issues that came up when President Trump, in his first term, was renegotiating NAFTA. He decided to just leave the immigration provisions, because there are, of course, immigration provisions in that agreement. He just decided to leave them alone because Congress didn't want the executive branch messing with immigration in trade agreements. I don't know if he realized that, that was something that had been fought out and agreed on, or if his trade representative basically said, yeah, we just can't do this. I don't know what the inside ballgame on that was. But Congress made it very clear back then that never again should immigration be part of trade agreements.
All right. So it seems to me that there may be something that can be done by AGs in the states, because now this, I'm throwing you a curveball here. With the Laken Riley Act, and I don't know what else, I'm just exploring something here. And obviously this is a friendly administration. I think most of the top dogs in the administration want to do the right thing, but there's so many things going on. They're accomplishing so much. It's hard to imagine that every voice gets heard equally because the train's moving so fast. If the AGs in the states use the provision in the Laken Riley Act, I didn't come up with this myself, and said, this is causing, the provision says if it causes an economic loss of more than $100, so it's not based just on a physical, a murder, rape, some kind of a crime like that, but if it causes $100 or more in loss to that state governments, it is authorizing, or to residents of the state, I suppose, the government of the states are now allowed, or they're given standing to take this to court. What are your thoughts about?
So that is actually a game changer in terms of situations like we had under the Biden administration, where the Biden administration opened up the borders and refused to enforce our immigration laws basically across the board. That provision is directed primarily at enforcement. So it is, enforcing against criminal aliens, illegal aliens, that kind of thing. And if we, God forbid, have another administration like the Biden administration, it will be probably the thing that saves America.
Okay.
It is not useful in terms of, if there's an international trade agreement, there's not much the states can do. They would not be able to sue the administration to prevent, visas, a trade agreement.
I'm thinking more about labor and how that the federal government, just like with refugee resettlement, is allowing, the federal government is destroying our free enterprise system because immigration is a perversion and a distortion of the market. So if you have a labor economy, or and you've got a market rather, and a jobs market, and Americans, as I like to say, we're limited because I'm an American. I want to stay in America. I have no reason to want to go somewhere else. My jobs are all going to be in America. That's for most Americans. We're limited in the jobs market, but in the labor market, our offshoring and our visa immigration system has granted this. I would say that corporate America is actually making immigration policy. They're deciding the demographic mix and the speed of immigration and what kind of people are immigrating, from where they're immigrating, it's really corporate America that is making these decisions rather than you and me and the people watching this show, so, and all Americans. So if they have perverted the market where they have opened up the labor market to 8 billion people in the world, but Americans are limited to the jobs just in America, this is something that is, it seems to me that INA is being broken. The very explicit, and I don't have them memorized, provisions where there shall be no, I'm using King James language, there shall not be any immigration or visas that will take jobs from Americans. Can the states use Lake and Riley in any way, the AGs, or is there another way for states to use the Constitution and have standing, or is that the only standing they have is the Lake and Riley Act?
There may be other ways that they can get standing, but the Lake and Riley one is the primary one now. They would not be able to sue if the labor market is being opened up by legal immigration. So, I mean, the problem that we have is that Congress has created laws with multiple loopholes. And for the most part, this is not obviously true across the board, but for the most part, corporations are exploiting those loopholes. They're not actively breaking the law. If they're breaking the law and the Trump administration or whatever administration refuses to enforce the law against them, that would be potentially reason for a lawsuit. But they're mostly not breaking the law. I mean, there's a lot of fraud. We both know that.
But I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I'm exploiting legal loopholes, and that. I mean, again, this comes back, and I am. I keep repeating this. All of my career, I've been doing this. Congress is squarely to blame.
Yes.
Congress is to blame for all of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Congress has absolute power to change it. Congress is refusing to change it. It has to be done by Congress. And, even if the president were to announce that he's going to use his authority to restrict the entry of any new aliens into the United States, we still would be, that would be great. And I would love to see it, but we still would be better off having Congress pass a moratorium bill, because then it would be, it would be in place until Congress acted again to change our immigration law.
The strategy that I see here is this. The founders wanted a president that was, they called, I think, energetic in the Federalist Papers. And so he is taking back the powers that have always been rightfully held by the executive branch, right? He's taking that back. And you can see that, almost no day goes by where he is not pushing forward these massive, beneficial, restoring of America types of actions, executive orders, what have you. It's happening, and a lot of things are happening behind the scenes that we still don't know about. If we could get the president to sign a moratorium, and we need it written out. If we could, I think I was working on one, because my wildest dreams, that's what I want. Then, with that period of conversation, educating the American people by hearing from the American people, and if 40% of Americans had any idea of what was really happening with the numbers, they would probably go to bed and say, I'm afraid to get out of bed because we've lost our country. It's that bad in America right now. And they would rise up and bring pressure against Congress. So perhaps a strategy is, if we can get the executive order, which is a big ask, I know it'll be it'll go to the courts. But again, that starts the conversation. That's part of his strategy, isn't it? And then we spend the time pressuring Congress and essentially primarying and getting out of Congress anybody who won't take the American people, the vast majority of us, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to see the president announce that he's using his authority to stop new entries into the United States. It would be fantastic. And it would start a conversation. The downside of President Trump doing it is that the conversation would be Trump bad versus immigration rather than mass immigration versus restrained immigration or restricted immigration. It would turn into a Trump derangement syndrome.
Of course, we have permanent Trump derangement syndrome in America anyway. Yeah. So, some of the things that they've done, I've thought, this is so brilliant because it's sort of like the bogus birthright citizenship that never was legal or constitutional. When he put out that executive order, he wasn't worrying, because he's President Trump, about it going to court. He knew it would, or backlash of being called, whatever they were calling him, xenophobe or whatever. And to me, getting the ball rolling is part of taking bold action.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need bold action. We cannot survive the status quo. We just can't.
I think we only have decades. I think we only have a few decades before the country is utterly eviscerated. And so this one post you just did, I'm so happy you did this post because this is so on my mind. Mamdani, he's a socialist, Marxist, communist, whatever you want to call them. They're all the same. They just have different philosophies that, put a different spin, but they're all the same. He shouldn't be running, nor should he be winning, just based on that alone. But the fact that we are not talking enough, you tell me if you think we're talking enough. I believe we're not talking enough about the fact that he is a Muslim and that he is an immigrant that has only been here 7 years, or he was naturalized 7 years ago. Beside the fact that he's a phony and a Marxist, this is a man who is a Sharia Islamist, radical, and we're in danger of New York becoming London. And we got to stop him. And you posted this brilliant post, the New York City mayoral poll for 2025. You reposted that among American-born New Yorkers, Andrew Cuomo was ahead by 40%. Then Zohran Mamdani at 31%, then Curtis Lewa at 25%. Among foreign-born New Yorkers, Zohran Mamdani is at 62%. If this is not a picture of why immigrants, mass immigration, illogical and irrational and unwise is probably the perfect word, types of immigration, our system, what the questions we're asking, which I do want to go to after you answer this, and the fact that we're allowing first-generation immigrants to run for office in America, and I know Congress has no control over the mayors in America. I know that I think that should be banned nationwide, either state by state or federally. I don't know which levels, but I don't think any American should live under a lawmaker that has been in this country 3 years, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. He comes on a boat, he passed the test, he gets a piece of paper, and now he's making laws for Americans whose families have been here for generations. So, and immigrants are going to vote for immigrants. We know that. And Democrats. Go ahead. Tell me what you're thinking on this.
I agree with all of that. And I think it's more than just immigrants will vote for immigrants. I think that over the last 30 or 40 years, we have brought immigrants into this country and told them that they are entitled to handouts, whether it's free public education, free medical care, all of these benefits that we give out, free food, free housing, all of this stuff. And then here's one of them standing up and saying, I'm going to give you more free stuff. These folks don't come from countries where they get free stuff from their government. So, they come to America and they get all this free stuff and they think they're entitled to it. And here's the guy saying, I'm going to give you more free stuff. We're all going to get free stuff. And so, of course, they're going to vote for the free stuff because this is brand new. They have no idea of our history, our culture, how taxpayers are actually paying for all of this, how we've gone into massive debt for all of this. And,
they don't care. They don't care because they don't have a sense of the passionate love that American has for their nation. And that is something that can only be done one person at a time, small groups, and where they're like one group is completely absorbed, not in enclaves of immigrants, but completely absorbed, and they're all American. Then you let some more in. You do it at a slow pace. Immigration should be slow. We're always hearing this ridiculous statement that we've got to fix this backlog. And I'm thinking, no, not only should you not fix the backlog, you should make the backlog legislatively, you should create a backlog that prevents from backlog to begin with, because you should be slowing it down so much. And I think we should be putting more restrictions on immigration. I think we should keep those caps on nationalities stricter than we are. Do you agree with that?
So I'm not in favor of going back to like a national origins-based system where you would restrict based on national origins. But what I will say is that the numbers matter. If you reduce the numbers far enough, you've solved the problem. I mean, if we took in 100,000 people a year from anywhere, even if they were all, Islamists, if we had 100,000, we would have the resources to track them with the FBI to know exactly what they're doing. We would have the resources to spread them out around the country, essentially force them to assimilate, not do Islamic calls to prayer in public, not change our culture to accommodate them, but require them to accommodate us because the numbers are small enough. But when we're letting in 1.1 million legal immigrants every single year, we're letting in probably at least 1 million non-immigrants, for a decent amount of time. I mean, there are 40 million tourists coming in too, but theoretically they only stay for a short time. But and then you have illegal immigration. So you're feeding into the enclaves that are, if you can live in a community in America where you never have to speak a language other than your home language, you never have to shop in a grocery store other than one run by someone from your home country, you never have to interact with Americans. Your public school, your kids' public school has, multiple languages and interpreters and all of the, English as second language stuff. Why would you assimilate? You've essentially just moved your home country to this American neighborhood and nobody's asking you to assimilate. And that is wrong.
I agree that the numbers is the most important thing because mass immigration of any form under any program is utterly an annihilation of the nation and the culture. So we are annihilating ourselves because of mass immigration. So if we just stop that alone and a moratorium, say a 3-year moratorium for us to all have a chat, let's chat about this, and then Americans decide. But I also would say this, that the thing that, and you and I have to be brave, like all Americans have to be brave, and, be strong and of a good courage, says God to Joshua and Deuteronomy. And we have to be strong. We don't care if they say, well, that's racist because it's not. That's Islamophobic because that's a fake word and there is no such thing anyway. Or that's mean because we're not called to play patty cake. We're called to protect something. And if I'm going to protect my kids, it's going to be aggressive. And when I look at our culture, I can safely say, and I say this without embarrassment because I utterly reject wokeness and Marxism, that and multiculturalism most of all, that bringing in Muslims is eventually going to lead to the downfall of America, just like it did to England, which is teetering on civil war. And what I look at is this, that, okay, not basing it on national origin, because I respect that, you have an opinion about that. But as far as I believe that if we brought in a bunch of French people and Germans and Austrians and Hungarians and blah, blah, Australians and Canadians, our biggest threat would be that we'd be bringing in liberals, right? And that's a threat because, it is a threat. But if we bring in people of a diametrically opposed religious, let's call it tradition, that is that every single doctrine of which is contrary to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, not Declaration of Opinion, a Declaration of Independence. When we bring those in, we are doing exactly what the founders said we should not do. And so I believe that we need to end Muslim immigration, even if I have friends that are Muslim, that are nice people. It's not about me and my next door neighbor being a nice Muslim. It's about too many Muslims will Islamize the country and then we will be annihilated eventually. So my question is, when I looked at the INA, I know it said something about no discrimination in immigration or maybe hiring, I don't remember, based on national origin. But cannot, under the INA, we have restrictions based on religion because that's not listed as a restricted class or protected class?
Religion would be hard to do. I don't know that it would survive court scrutiny, even with the Supreme Court. But what is entirely possible is to ban adherence of Sharia law. And Sharia is clearly, without question, antithetical to our Constitution. It is antithetical to everything we believe in this country and should be banned. I completely agree on that. And that's an easy one because Sharia law is not the religion.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Isn't there a bill that's up before Congress now?
Chip Roy has a bill to bar adherence and to deport adherence of Sharia law. And I think that is absolutely legitimate and should be done. As a woman, I do not want Sharia law anywhere near country. And that's there are some problems. And even if you did this on national origin, you would have trouble because, okay, you're going to import a bunch of French people. How many French people are now Muslim?
Oh, yeah, I don't want to do it on national origin. I was just saying you could get a bunch of French people here and it would make a ripple. We'd have more liberals, probably. But it's certainly not like an antithetical, incompatible religion that is radical to its core. The Quran there's no such thing as radical Islam. There's just Quranic Islam. And then there's people who are not following the Quran. Okay. But we can't see in the heart and in the mind. And we can't know what their kids and grandkids, because the children of immigrants it's been shown in the UK and all over Europe that the children of immigrants, even if the immigrants were really not practicing their religion, they're more likely to have children that are radical because they're rebelling against their parents' lack of adherence to the faith. And so, you once you let Islam in. Now, you said Sharia, and I agree with you because the Quran is basically Sharia. Of course, the Hadith and all of that. But if you ban adherence to Sharia, then you are essentially restricting the number of persons who profess Islam as their faith from coming in. Can we also do something like that we will put a cap on a percentage of the total of the population? I think about these things a lot, so maybe this is like random to you, but where we say that, say Islam, I'm going to use Islam as an example, but I don't want people who practice voodoo coming into the country, just like I don't want witchcraft to be brought in the country, Santeria from Cuba. I do not want cannibalism to come in the country. And I don't want to have people that eat geese, cats, and dogs. So there are all kinds of things that I think we as self-respecting Americans can say, no, we don't want to bring, say, headhunters and cannibals in. So are there any other things that we don't want in here that will undermine us? So can we say that Islam can be no more, we will not allow any more immigrants until Islam is at the 1% cap of the country, and that it will stay there, and that we will essentially say no more Middle Eastern or Islamic immigration if it takes us over a 1% cap? That's a random number. Have you ever heard something like that? Because if we kept it at 1%, we might be okay.
I honestly just don't know how that would work under our laws. I mean, once people are in the United States, like what happens if some people convert to Islam and it takes it over 1%? Do you get rid of them? Do you?
No,
I mean,
we just don't allow any more immigrants until it's, because more people will have babies and eventually, and there'll be more immigrants. What about this? Oh, go ahead.
My preference would be to just limit the numbers significantly. I mean, if you limited total immigration to, the spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens, so who Americans would still be free to marry whoever they want, but and then small handful of the absolute geniuses that are. Yeah, well, not even. I mean, I would reform the O1 system because I don't even think that's genius.
I think it's
real
genius. Yeah, you're right. You totally.
I mean,
they're faking that anyway. They're paying for theses and articles, and it's all fake.
Exactly. And you could basically just stop it there. If you have.
Oh, I'm with you on that 100%.
That would be fantastic. And then we don't even have to worry. We don't even have to worry about what religion or, are they cannibals or not? Because if they're cannibals, we're going to deport them as soon as we find out. But if the numbers are that small, then there's no group that can cause us the kind of trouble that would take over
because
our
they're going to die out. Because a cannibal's kids are probably not going to be cannibals, right? And 25% of Muslims apostatize worldwide, and it's probably much higher in the United States. So I'm hoping our evangelists go out there and do their duty. But
if they're limited enough that they're not able to congregate with large groups of like people, then it's even more likely that they actually assimilate into American culture rather than asking us to accommodate their culture.
Let's talk about this Sharia law idea of yours, because I literally have that in half of my notes, because I think it's an absolute. And then when I saw that bill being proposed, I thought, praise God. If we limited on Sharia law, I believe that when we fast track immigration, green card status is ridiculous. They're treated like citizens, and we just do it at the drop of a hat. I mean, it's absurd. So that has to be stopped. But if we implemented the Sharia law ban or restriction, what I want to know is this. If an immigrant, this is a big question, an immigrant comes into the United States, however he does so, and we find out later that he lied, or that I'll leave it at that for right now, that he lied. I don't believe that those people are being deported, and I believe they should be able to be denaturalized when I say at the drop of a hat. I believe that there should be a system where it can be done without every individual having a 6-month trial or something, that if they've lied and said, no, I disavow Sharia law. And I would take it to specific things like plural marriage, polygamy. I would actually list things that they would have to check them off. I disavow this. I disavow this. I disavow this. If they're out there on the streets, oh, by the way, and one would be terrorism, jihad, caliphate, worldwide caliphate. They're out on the streets promoting this, or they're writing articles promoting it. Even if they have a green card, I want them gone. I want them denaturalized. If they have become an American citizen, it's just a piece of paper under false pretenses, it's worse than illegal immigration. I believe that this is an outrage to the soul of this country and to every man, woman, and child. Can we up our game on denaturalization from the legal standpoint?
100%. And that is, if you have falsely answered any question on your citizenship application or in your immigration documents to come here, you can be deported. And this government, the Trump administration, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is actually starting to investigate citizenship fraud. So they are now going back and looking, and you saw that they did a couple of weeks ago, they did a big operation in Minnesota and found a ton of fraud.
Half of the ones they looked at were there fraudulently.
Yeah. And they are looking at citizenship issues there as well. And
we're importing fraudsters into the country, because when you come from a country like Somalia, which is a kleptocracy, it's a failed state, and the culture is very much corrupt. It's a corrupt culture. And so since the Somalian, the Civil War, we've just been allowing them to come in droves, and they're corrupting our country. And by the way, I find it very offensive that Black Americans who've been here for 7, 8, 10 generations, their family goes back, and they're being lumped in to get the same kind of benefits, if any, that Black Americans might get because of their skin color. And that's a problem. Well, can we denaturalize, though? Can we see the problem we have right now? Mondani, as far as I'm concerned, should be deported and denaturalized, because he really is a Marxist, communist, socialist. But because of I would call it silliness of wording, where it just limits it to, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Well, I mean, and by the way, I think there's even an issue in there of giving you a clause where you could say, maybe that you were forcibly required to be part of the party, and that gives you an out. So basically that does nothing for us. But I heard that G.K. Chesterton wrote that when he was coming into the United States, the questionnaire that he had to fill out required him to affirm that he's not a seditionist or an anarchist, and that he was not here to do anything to undermine the constitutional order or, the United States of America. And I thought, how do we beef up, besides adding Sharia, and I would say, like I already mentioned, individual aspects of Sharia, so nobody can say, well, I didn't mean that. Can we add more clauses to restrict it to people that love Americanism and actually are coming here because they want to be Americans, don't want to freeload or turn us into a caliphate? What other kind of questions would you ask?
Well, so first of all, I think we will have to recognize that Sharia law actually orders people to lie,
right,
for cause. So we're going to have to address that. by
Kia.
asking the right questions. Exactly. So we can do this in a couple of ways. You could change the application process so that they have to, answer this list of questions. You could also have them interviewed in person, which should happen across the board. I mean, the State Department, probably 6 or 7 years ago, started waiving in-person interviews, maybe even earlier than that. And that's ridiculous. Every single person who's coming into the United States with a visa should have an in-person interview, and it should be recorded, and the consular officials should be asking them all of these questions. And,
on camera, by the way, for evidence.
Absolutely. And then for people who come into the United States, at every change of status or every other time they come in contact with the Department of Homeland Security, they should be interviewed again.
Yes.
We should not be relying on that first interview, which is what they do now. Oh, well, they had an interview with the State Department, so we don't need to interview them if they adjust from
because people don't lie. People are not evil. People don't sin. Right. I mean, this whole fantasy world, or immigrants are just coming here to get a better life. I'm literally hearing that from people all over the world, that for a better life, they've actually had that drilled into them. I don't care. What about the better life of you, me, my children, grandchildren, my neighbors, my fellow countrymen? That's whose better life I'm chiefly concerned for. So continue. I'm sorry for my outburst.
No, I agree with all that. I think we will get much better results from in-person interviews than any list of questions on a form, because it's generally in this face-to-face situation where the lies are discernible. And, every investigator will tell you it's, sitting down with someone face-to-face, that's where you start getting
Are
the
they
tell.
Trained to be able to prompt someone to lie, trip themselves up, and actually look at the facial expressions and things?
Yeah, a lot of them are, not all of them. And at USCIS, there are some of the folks in the Fraud Detection and National Security Office who do some of the interviews where they have national security questions, and they are trained. The consular officials should be trained. I know they're trained in kind of the tricks that a lot of people use. I don't know if they're trained in sort of the psychological tells, but they should be. And that should be a prime place for this, because consular officials can essentially use their discretion to deny visas. So you just stop it before it starts. You don't even get them into the system if you can stop them at that interview process. And so that would be the best way, because then, you're not risking lawsuits or anything else, because there's a discretionary ability to just say, no, sorry, your visa is not approved.
I agree always with, we want to do the thing that just shuts the system down as we know it. I ask these questions on specific things because even though it seems like, well, we're back to nibbling, but maybe we can take some big bites, like out of a Dagwood sandwich, while we're trying to work both tracks. We want the shutdown, and we want realism and the American people to speak and be heard and to be obeyed. But at the same time, for instance, with these applications, thank you for explaining that they shut down the in-person. As I look at these 1.1 million green cards that were issued in 2024 and the 818,500 that were given citizenship in fiscal 2024, that was fiscal. When I look at these numbers, 730,000 H-1B holders are currently in the U.S., 550,000 dependents of H-1B holders, 289,938 foreign students were given jobs after leaving school, which is against INA. I mean, 905 applicants were made for asylum, and they're in the United States, so they're treated as American citizens when it comes to jobs, and 100,000 refugees. These numbers are insane. And there is no one that can possibly, that's called overwhelming the system. It's a it's a tactic of war. This is a tactic of war. And if we said that every single person had to at least be interviewed one time, at least once, before they could gain any of these things and go on to a next stage, that we would be shutting this system down right there, because we just have to say, well, we can't because we only have 5,000 officers doing this and there's too many of them.
We do. We have a lot of, I don't know how many consular officers we have around the world. There are a lot of them. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that they stopped doing the in-person interviews, was because, it took up time and resources. And
does that mean that we have too many? Right?
Yes.
If you have a restaurant and you can't serve all the people, you're letting too many people in the restaurant and you don't have enough because you don't have enough tables even, whatever. So yeah, but the denaturalization, I believe that it should be part of the law in a more strenuous way, because I have seen things like statute of limitations. Well, if they lied to get in, but it's 5 years, more than 5 years ago, and I'm thinking, so you're letting a con artist, a liar, a fraudster to become a United States citizen, and then because it's 6 years after his fraudulent con on the United States, the people of the United States, well, it's statute of limitations. Don't you think that should be extended 20, 30 years or forever?
I don't think there is a statute of limitations on immigration stuff. There's this, you wanted to criminally charge somebody for fraud. I'm sure there's a statute of limitations, but for immigration purposes, you can take away their benefit or, remove them. I mean, committing fraud on your application makes you removable. And I don't think that ever goes away.
Oh, so good.
Denaturalization.
Maybe it was just charging them with a crime for purposes of, okay.
That would be completely different. But if you just want to impose immigration sanctions, you can definitely do that. I mean, that's why we were able to denaturalize, people who were apparently 50 years later.
Okay.
So
I was wrong. Thank you for correcting me. So denaturalization, we just need to be stronger on our questioning. And I think I believe that we should bar socialists. Are you a socialist? Are you a communist of any flavor, a Marxist, a Leninist, a Maoist, or any new thing that you come up with in the future? All those, because that is antithetical to our way of life. Bernie Sanders can call himself a Democrat socialist, and Zoran Mandani can call themselves Democrat socialists. We know that's a lie. And we can't stop somebody from becoming a practitioner of voodoo in America or a socialist, but we sure in the heck can prevent socialists and practitioners of voodoo from coming into the United States. And it seems to me that if the immigrant were required to say, no, I'm not this kind, this kind, this kind, this kind, or any other kind, in 10 years' time, if you say I'm running for office as a socialist, you can be deported or denaturalized then.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing is, if you have not yet become a citizen, you should be immediately deported if you indicate in any way that you hate America or that you hate our form of government. You should never get a chance to apply for citizenship. And I mean, all of these students who have been, protesting on behalf of terrorists, they should be gone. There should be no question. Like, you do not have the right to come to America and say that you hate America and you want America to be ended. Bye-bye, go home. We don't want you here. Then if you become a citizen and then you are a communist or a Islamist or whatever, at that point, we need to go back and look at your all of your applications, your interview.
Every last one. We're going to find you fake fraud.
Yeah.
I never thought about it until just now. So this is random, just coming out of the blue. But why can't we, because it's un-American, ask if they are racist or anti-Semitic? I mean,
we can. There's
we can.
nothing.
My neighbor may raise a racist kid, but that doesn't mean we have to allow a foreigner to be a racist coming in.
Yeah.
Let me jump to something else. How could we change? Okay, barring the fact, with understanding that we want to end the nightmare drastically and utterly. Green cards, the way that they are treated as citizens. I've kind of explored this question before. I believe that we have made a massive mistake in allowing the number of green card holders into the United States. And I believe that if there is a legal way to do it, or if we can pass a bill, that we should be making green cards now something that must be renewed. I know that that's not how they're defined right now. I believe it's not a legal permanent residence, LPR, and that they can work, and it's not something that has to be renewed or has an end date. But can we go back and just say, because this is our country, our law, you're not a citizen, we are going to change the regulation with regard to green cards, and we are going to review all applicants after 10 years or 5 years, and maybe make it so that it's not a dramatic hardship, but that we can start a process of expelling or sending home green card holders that should never have been brought into the United States or given green cards to begin with, because there's some really bad things happening in this area. What are your thoughts about that?
So the green card holders do actually have to renew the actual physical card that they get.
How frequently?
I think it's every 10 years. And so you could very easily say, when you renew your actual physical green card, we're going to do a review and we'll check your social media. It will, check that you have not ever used public welfare benefits or, whatever it is, whatever criteria you want to put on there, because already we have laws that say that you're not allowed to become a public charge. You're not allowed to commit crimes. All of these different things. Well, we should be checking that upon renewal of that green, if we haven't already caught you doing something and, put you into removal proceeding.
Wow. Thank you for that answer. This is so much fun. Rosemary, I'm having such a great time. This is all I think about. And my Bible and immigration. Okay. So this is a big question for you. President Trump has stated that he's got $17 trillion in investment. And I would say, I think all of that, though it may not all be foreign investment. But what I'm curious about, not with President Trump, because I've been given no indication that this is the case yet, but I believe it will happen, that all of these jobs, they're trying to get, say, a chip maker's visa. They're trying to create another one of those confetti, this collage of specialty visas, work visas. And I believe that when we take money from foreign investors to build in America, and I think that's a wonderful thing with caveats. And the reality is we should look him in the eye and say, fine, but you're going to hire American citizens. You can have 1% of your plant or your operation from your home country to speak your language. I get it, because you've got, if you're building cars here, maybe you want some management to be from Korea or wherever, or 0.5% or 1% or something like that, where they can bring in and rotate in and out and keeping it below a threshold. What's happening with this? Do you have any intel for us? Restricting it to only American-born people, no immigrants. I would say no green card holders. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have insight into that specifically, like how those things are being negotiated. Um, obviously, President Trump did the right thing initially with the South Korean, the Hyundai plant, where ICE was allowed to go in and clean out. And then, it turned out that a lot of those workers were here on tourist visas, which, of course, they're not allowed to work on. And so they went home. Um, the kind of apologies after that were kind of crazy because, of course, there is one visa that they could have used to legally bring in, the managerial level people.
The
if they
apologies
needed them
are shameful. I don't want to say shameful. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction, I think, that President Trump has. It's his way of moving things forward and being nice. Like, when he talks about Putin and Xi Jinping. I mean, really, we're talking about dictators, but he still says we have a great relationship, and it's just his way. But I think it's embarrassing.
I also think that it tells me that nobody explained it to him in a way that he really understood, that we did nothing wrong here. They were at fault, period. And I think if that had been explained, then, he can sort of temper that with, we want to keep making deals with you, but obviously no apology because we did nothing wrong. I will tell you, and again, this is going to be anticlimactic because I can't tell you who's doing it, but I am expecting that there is going to be a really great H-1B bill coming out that is going to take care of so many things, like ending OPT, ending adjustment of status.
Oh,
like a crop board. There's another really big one. I can't remember.
For our viewers, adjustment of status is when somebody comes in on one visa where they're never supposed to become green card holders or immigrants. They're supposed to go straight home. They're only supposed to work under certain conditions or be a student. And then somehow, after they make these vows that I'm only here to be a student, they get an adjustment of status, and then they somehow go into a worker. You're never supposed to be allowed to do that. And what they do is they come in on any given visa, whatever they can get, even buying visas from foreigners that are here on visas, and through a complex thing. And then they just keep adjusting status until they're finally at green card, and then hopefully for them, in their hopes, become a naturalized citizen. But even though they're really going counter to our system all the way, but we are the ones allowing it, just to be fair to them.
Also, the impact of that on, for example, the student to H-1B pipeline, also the bill would end OPT, which is great. But if you end adjustment of status between student and H-1B, that means that all of those students have to return to their home countries in order to apply for an H-1B, which would mean that President Trump's $100,000 fee would apply to that. So this would get everybody who's getting out of paying that $100,000 fee, because nobody would be allowed to adjust to H-1B status or any other status. That is it. This bill will be the strongest bill that I have ever seen in 35 years of doing this. And I am praying that it's going to be introduced soon.
Can we call it comprehensive immigration reform? Because that's, okay, we all know that that's a lie. That name, comprehensive immigration reform, means amnesty, opening it up to more immigration, breaking down the barriers and restrictions, and destroying America. That's what the code word is for what I just defined here. But if we call it comprehensive immigration reform bill, we've got a comprehensive immigration reform bill, and it truly does a very comprehensive, or at least pretty comprehensive, because I think you and I and, Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller and Amanda Bartolota and Kevin Lynn and all, Kerkorian, we have to come up with a way that individual Congress people are going to know especially Republicans, that this is their ticket to political happiness. I told Senator Schmidt before he did this great speech on it, and so I'm not sure if I had encouraged him whatsoever. I said, look, the politician, the statesman, the congressperson that takes a stand on this and rides it through is like a man and like a woman. They're going to stand tall and firm and unashamed. That person will become a hero of this age and be in the history books. And they will be a president in the future, most likely, because the number of people in America that are anti any immigration at all, other than, this tiny little dribble of things, is massive. And so I'm thinking maybe polls, doing a kind of poll that truly exposes the kind of poll that when you explain, like, how many, you asked a question, how many foreigners do you think were naturalized to become American citizens last year? And somebody says 20,000, right? Somebody will just say 20,000, 30,000. Well, if I told you that it was 818,000, almost a million, would you be concerned? Or I know I'm obviously shading this question from my opinion, but if you put together perhaps a series of polls that expose to people, because it's educational, they're learning something, but then it shows how dramatically they are against it. If we told you this, what would you say? ABC.
Yes.
Or I don't know how to get Congress to awaken about this and to fear the wrath of the voters at the polling place. But we got to get Republicans to actually set it up and say, we're going to stand firm so the Democrats can either join side or oppose them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways that we've done polling in the past is on legal immigration, is to say, do you think that legal immigration is too high, too low, or about right? And they, say either about right or too low or whatever. And then you say, do you know that it's 1.1 million a year, every single year? And then they're like, whoa, too high, too high, too high. So yeah, that kind of thing works. But in terms of getting Congress's attention, the biggest issue we face is that all of these special interests are where the money is. And that means that's where the campaign donations are. And so we're asking politicians, and I don't have any trouble asking them this, but we're asking them to side with us instead of their campaign donor. So we have to be able to show them why it's worth it to do that. And I think we can do that if we can mobilize, if we could mobilize all of the H-1B people on Twitter, we could have a major impact. But instead of actually all coming together on something, you end up with these little, well, it doesn't go far enough for me, or I want this, or, and really hoping that this bill that's, please God, coming out soon is going to go far enough that people will come around it, because it's the kind of thing that could just make an enormous generational difference for American workers, the people who are graduating now or in the near future. If we can come together around a particular message or a piece of legislation and really use our voice as one voice, think we can get their attention and start pulling them off. I mean, if you look back to the mid-2000s, there was not a member of Congress to speak of who was saying anything at all about H-1Bs or OPT or anything else. And now we have several. And if we make them heroes...
And we have to make them heroes because they are. If they're willing to stand up and be called Islamophobes and racists and xenophobes and natalist, then, and to stand up against the big donors, I think it's really important for people to understand that The India lobby, by the way, our new whistleblower is an in-depth report just on the India lobby, corrupt immigration programs, and rampant offshoring decimating the U.S. workforce. That what we have to do is what we have to know is this: that the immigration industrial complex, the immigration lobby, and the India lobby, that the amount of money put in there would rival some of the top special interests like pharma and the military, defense contractors and all this. It is massive, the money. And think about us. The rest of us are just Americans, voters with the birthright and labor. So all of the immigrants have the immigration lawyers. They have all of the big multi-billion-dollar companies, the multinational companies, Wall Street, Fortune 500, the massive NGOs. They go and they spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you got the guy coding in Santa Clara that's lost his job to an immigrant, and he doesn't have anybody representing him in Congress. Do we need something like that?
This is the other thing is organizations like mine, we're struggling to survive. And looking at the other side going, where is all this money coming from? And yet we're representing the vast majority of Americans, but we're representing the ones that don't have the money.
That's right.
To, make political contributions or make charitable donations. And we're happy to do that because it's the right thing to do and it's the right position to take. But it is frustrating. We've basically done pretty darn well getting our voices heard and the voices of the people we're representing, considering what we're up against. But we've got to figure out how to get past what we're up against because it is an enormous obstacle.
Yeah, it's really bad. And I think that maybe we should put our heads together and talk about how we gain the momentum or regain momentum when this bill comes out that you're talking about, because we've got to keep the momentum going. With the H-1B, when it was, right after Christmas, and that flared up, and several times conversations have flared up again. But what and by the way, every time you're taking new ground, more people, the more they see the numbers, the more they see that's where I said, I'm committed to this. I'm moving forward. At WorldNetDaily, we hired a reporter just to cover this issue full time because I was all in when I really understood where we had gotten ourselves to. And so that was really in January of this last year. And I've done, I don't know how many interviews and videos on immigration alone. But I think that we can come up with a plan, hopefully maybe people even smarter and more creative than myself, to grasp that momentum and keep it going. I think that we're facing, for instance, Cognizant, Infosys, Tata, and for those who don't remember, these are three of multi-billion-dollar companies that are either owned in India or they are controlled by Indian corporations, and some of them are actually incorporated here in America. And these are foreigners that have come to America, set up shop for staffing, which means outsourcing from American companies using their staffing services. They only use immigrants. So we have foreigners setting up shop in America to compete, to bring in more foreigners. That's their business model, to take jobs from Americans. I want to know this. Firstly, that is insanity on steroids. I believe that we should pass a law that says that any company that is owned by more than this much by foreigners, and I would make it small, don't make it 75%, 50%, 40%, anything over a threshold that they cannot be importing, or maybe it's 0%, any immigrants into the United States other than maybe a restricted L1 or a family thing. What do you think about that?
So one of the things that I am actually hoping will be in this bill is a complete 100% ban on third-party employment.
Using immigrants.
Yeah. So like the Tatas, the Infosys, the Cognizants would not be allowed to petition for any foreign workers because they contract them out to do work for other employers. So there would be no third party.
It's a conflict of interest. It's a foreigner. What I also say, because I say a lot of things all the time, is that foreigners are determining our immigration status. I mean, that is terrifying. They are making a decision. Cognizant, Infosys, Wipro, Tata, they're called the witch companies because of the first initial of their names, plus others. And by the way, this small individual H-1B or green card holder immigrant from China, India, and I'm not sure where in the Middle East if this is happening the same way, but China and India do this, and Somalia, no doubt. They are actually setting up little businesses where they're a third or fourth party, where here's Microsoft, they contract with Cognizant, Infosys, Tata, they contract with these individuals. There are tens of thousands of them that are also bringing people, maybe on a family visa, whatever it is. So we have a criminal enterprise. I call it criminal because it is usually criminal. They're usually breaking the law, the immigration law, that is from coast to coast in this country. And you're telling me that we may be able to beat that. E-Verify, I guess I need to bring this to a close. I wasn't supposed to keep you on for longer than an hour. Let me ask you this question. E-Verify. I talked to somebody who told me that President Trump has the authority right now, today, to expand E-Verify to what its legislative intention was originally. They were having a testing period. We're still basically in this testing period where they were to implement it. It was voluntary for U.S. companies and it was mandatory for contractors working with the federal government. Most states do not make it mandatory for themselves or for just businesses in America. And so much of this corruption, our states are actually hiring foreigners to manage state government business, if you can believe this, on immigration and worker visas. And offshoring to India, one of the most, a country that has the most problem with fraud and corruption and tech fraud and all that is India's, like one of the tops. He said that he can make it mandatory on all businesses in the United States, coast to coast. Was he correct about that?
No. The president does not have the authority to make it mandatory for anyone except federal agencies, which it is, and federal contractors, which it is. Every state governor has the authority to make it mandatory for state agencies and state contractors, or for all businesses if they pass a law through the legislature. But the governors can do this through executive order for state agencies and state contractors, just as the president can do it for federal agencies and federal contractors. Congress has to do it for everybody to make it mandatory nationwide. But I want to also tell you, every single governor in this country has the authority right now to ban state agencies from hiring non-immigrant workers.
Without passing legislation?
Without passing legislation, because the governors are the executives of the state. They run the business at state.
Right.
So they can say, no state agency can hire an H-1B or an OPT or, any other non-immigrant. And every state governor has the authority to disallow